a Ukrainian artillery unit prepares a devastating strike on a Russian position, transforming the battlefield into a landscape of fire and destruction. The equipment losses are staggering, and every new Russian column sent to break Ukrainian defensive lines faces the same outcome. Aerial surveillance detects every movement with precision, while constant bombardment destroys armored vehicles one by one. Every tank, armored personnel carrier, or infantry fighting vehicle, regardless of its level of protection, remains vulnerable to coordinated strikes. Sustained pressure and accurate targeting continue to inflict heavy equipment losses as advancing formations come under repeated attack. They may advance as a formation for a time, but repeated drone attacks eventually force the vehicles to disperse. Once separated, each vehicle becomes more exposed, making it increasingly difficult to provide mutual support or coordinated protection. Once a drone is deployed, it locates the vehicle and conducts a strike, often forcing it to stop. The stationary target then becomes vulnerable to follow-up artillery fire, leaving the vehicle heavily damaged or destroyed. As these strikes are repeated over time and across the battlefield, the result is an expanding graveyard of destroyed Russian armored vehicles. In contrast, Russian artillery have been more interested in striking civilian buildings. In May 2026, artillery and drone strikes hit a civilian shelter in the village of Stepanivka, Donetsk region. Russian state media blamed Ukraine for the attack, while analysis of the published footage concluded that the artillery fire originated from Russian-controlled territory. The footage shows the surviving civilians being forced to raise a Russian flag that had been dropped by a drone. Another Russian war crime was recorded in May 2026, when a Russian Telegram channel published footage showing an attack on a clearly marked UN vehicle delivering food and medical aid. The footage shows a clearly marked UN vehicle being struck by what appears to be a kamikaze drone. The Russian artillery unit targeted a UN vehicle delivering food and medical aid to Ukrainian civilians. The prolonged conflict has clearly had an impact on the Russian side, which has faced repeated accusations of committing war crimes since the start of the war. It goes without saying that countless homes have been destroyed, and countless civilian lives have been lost during the war, particularly as a result of artillery strikes and sustained bombardment. The aftermath in lost territories such as Bakhmut clearly illustrates the widespread destruction left behind by heavy fighting. Among the most recognizable symbols of the war are the destroyed Russian military vehicles that now line many of Ukraine's rural roads like these. The reason for the destruction is straightforward. Ukrainian artillery and FPV drones work together to target these vehicles. Skilled drone operators maneuver toward vulnerable points on the vehicle, and the resulting blast often speaks for itself. Now, during a nighttime operation, a Ukrainian artillery unit launched multiple Flamingo missiles at the Federal Research and Production Center, Titan Barakati in Volgograd. The facility manufactures components used in Russia's ballistic missile systems, including the Iskander, one of the primary missiles Russia has used to strike targets across Ukraine. However, the fighting has increasingly reached Russian territory. In a single operation conducted in June 2026, Ukrainian strikes reportedly halted production of 2 facilities, demonstrating the growing reach of Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities. Defensive innovations are also becoming increasingly creative. Soldiers from Ukraine's 128th Mountain Assault Brigade used a simple rope and stick attachment to bring down 10 Russian Mavic reconnaissance drones, denying Russian forces valuable aerial surveillance and artillery targeting capabilities. Every enemy drone destroyed reduces Russia's ability to observe Ukrainian positions, improving the survivability of Ukrainian troops on the battlefield. Even heavier Russian military equipment, such as artillery systems positioned far behind the front line, can sometimes be detected by modern reconnaissance drones. Once located, their coordinates can be relayed for follow-up strikes, allowing Ukrainian forces to target assets well beyond the front line itself. In the next footage, Ukraine demonstrates a different approach to artillery warfare. While Russian artillery has often relied on area bombardment to engage suspected targets, Ukrainian forces have increasingly emphasized precision strikes against identified objectives. In this case, a field ammunition storage site is destroyed with a direct and accurate artillery strike. Within moments, the single strike causes the stored ammunition to detonate, triggering a chain reaction that destroys the entire ammunition depot. A typical Ukrainian drone strike begins with reconnaissance drones locating and identifying the target. Once confirmed, an FPV kamikaze drone is launched, if one is not already operating in the area, and guided toward the target to carry out a precision strike. Once moving targets have been eliminated, attention can shift to stationary ones. In this case, the target is the newly manufactured and upgraded Russian unmanned ground vehicle designated the NRTK, Courier 2.0. Another Russian unmanned ground vehicles are struck by multiple kamikaze drones until they are completely destroyed. In this footage, a Russian Su-57 fighter jet is reportedly shot down by Ukrainian fire, with burning debris illuminating the night sky. Incidents involving the loss of Russian combat aircraft have occurred repeatedly throughout the war, with visually documented and officially reported estimates indicating that Russia has lost hundreds of fixed-wing aircraft in the 4-year period. The most effective strategy is often to destroy these aircraft while they are still on the ground. Striking Russian air bases allows Ukrainian forces to target stationary aircraft, which are generally easier to hit than fast-moving targets in the air. Such operations require suppressing or bypassing air defenses, and many air bases are located far from the front line. However, Ukraine's long-range strike drones can travel well over 1,000 kilometers, making deep strikes against military infrastructure possible. However, these missions are highly challenging. Aircraft can be relocated quickly, the distances involved are considerable, and incoming drones may be detected long before reaching their targets. As a result, every stage of the operation must be carefully planned to maximize the chances of a successful strike. Ukrainian artillery has demonstrated a high level of effectiveness throughout the war. Supported by reconnaissance drones and real-time battlefield intelligence, artillery units have repeatedly carried out precise strikes against Russian positions, equipment, and logistics, often engaging targets shortly after they are detected. The compounding losses from these strikes, particularly on the Russian side, continue to reduce combat effectiveness and the overall ability to capture additional Ukrainian territory. As the war continues, any future peace negotiations are likely to be influenced by the military situation on the ground. The battlefield will remain a key factor in determining the leverage and bargaining position of both sides. Artillery will continue to play a decisive role in that process. The war has shown that both traditional artillery and modern drone-guided strikes can have a massive impact on the battlefield. As precision, coordination, and reconnaissance continue to improve, artillery remains one of the most influential weapons shaping the course of the conflict, and its role should not be forgotten.